we've been discussing the evolution of printing as impacted upon also by COVID. So let me invite on the stage Vincenzo Baglieri. He is the Professor of Practice at SDA Bocconi School of Management. Let us not shake hands, but let us speak instead of what Industry 4.0 is. Because you're one of those experts who have tried to understand where this industry is going and what's been the impact of the crisis. So let's start from this.
Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. In a nutshell, I will try to summarize the highlights or the set of evidence that we collected in recent times. And I would like to clarify the following, though. The Federation that contributes to this event today, back in 2018, launched an important project in collaboration with the university I represent, the School of Management at SDA Bocconi. So the introduction of the 4.0 industry, and we call this project Printing 4.0, and this project has stepped into the so-called phase 2, so the execution phase. What I can share with you today is the following. In other words, what's happening in terms of overall scenario, and then we're going to drill down and try to see how Industry 4.0 can help us and businesses improve their competitive and performance edge. If you help me with the slides or you give me the pointer, I can start the presentation. So next slide, please. I pulled together these slides a few days ago, allow me to say that, and probably they need to be updated day in, day out, but they serve a very simple purpose. That is to say, a crisis such as the one we are experiencing, which was, by the way, imposed by some sort of an abnormal choice in terms of history of epidemiology, because we deployed lockdown strategies like 40% of the world population, and we quarantined like healthy subjects, and we did the opposite that we would normally do. And this was done because in the short run we didn't actually have the possibility of identifying infected subjects. The direct repercussion of that is that we literally halted our economic system ability to create transactions that imply contacts as well as mobility. So this was an unprecedented crisis, really a perturbation, and no economics handbooks could have predicted the solutions we came up with. However, it relays two important sets of messages. There are some sectors that are really in trouble, and they will struggle a lot, and there are other sectors that are doing better, and they will improve even more. So there are some areas that are really benefiting from the consequences of this pandemic. Let me just quote one example for all. In recent weeks, we noticed a major growth in large distribution providers, so big distributors, and so this has really boomed. Some types of purchases got priority over others, and a lot of businesses are questioning past strategies due to excessive fragmentation of product portfolio, because this obviously had to juggle with the complexity of packaging solution. solution. So distribution companies or mass retailers are trying to reduce the number of SKUs and all the codes that they have in their own product portfolios. And they're also rethinking printing solutions as well as material and packaging solutions for products that are deemed to be sold and distributed in a different economic setting. So paradoxically speaking, there is a request for simplifying graphics as well as printing as well as packaging solutions. So I would like to reassure our listeners, yes, we are in murky waters, it's complicated, but we have to bear in mind two things specifically. Number one, there is a negative peak, but there's going to be a rebound effect. As a result of this rebound effect, a lot of opportunities will open up. And what will save us is technology. Technology in this particular historical era will enable us to get out from this crisis, not because we're going back to square one, but because we are embracing hybridization, for example. Let's think about the sudden discovery of all the benefits resulting from smart working, or better said, remote working, because under certain circumstances it wasn't that smart. But having said that, it really unleashed in the business world the perception that being at home doesn't necessarily mean to be unproductive. And in the academia world, for example, online learning is not necessarily a lower quality type of learning. It needs to be well designed, it needs to be well provided, similar to what we're doing today. I mean, there is no physical audience here, but there are almost 1,200 attendees. And so we're actually hitting the nail on the head. That is to say, we are striving to distribute contents in a positive fashion. Let me add a few words. Next slide, please. This is very typical to Italy, I have to say. I don't know whether our colleagues abroad have the same perception, and this perception really depends on geographies. The US is experiencing this crisis in a way, South America in another way. Far East have gone beyond that, and they're worried about a second wave. Having said that, though, despite all complexities and struggles, and as far as Italy is concerned, despite the intricate set of mechanisms that we've inherited from the ancient history,
it's also structurally difficult, right?
Exactly. So the banking system was inapt to react promptly to this shockwave. So a lot of resources will be deployed to the market, and this slide shows what happened in recent weeks. Looking at Europe, so the European Central Bank, you see the purchase of bonds and shares and liquidity in the market. So the market will be swamped with resources, and hopefully some of these resources will be allocated to a strategic sector such as public health, which no longer sits on the bumper seat, and all the manufacturing sectors, for example, because we are looking into the production of items that need to be packaged and distributed in the best possible way. So if businesses are smart enough to lobby a bit in this sense, we will have a lot of opportunities. So technology will save us, will help us, and will be deployed in our businesses. This is a crucial point, and I would like to invite all of us to think of it with a serene mindset.
This is one of the few areas where it's clear that we can be optimistic, right?
And so let's talk about Industry 4.0. Next slide, please. These are quotes that date back to last week approximately. And we have some verbatim here. So Industry 4.0, it's like going to your cardiologist and ask him what's the most important organ, the heart, he would say. Well, here I have verbatim from key opinion leaders in our industry, and there could be like equal ones for the US or Germany. I just want to mention the source. There are 3 quotes here. So one is issued by EY, which is a major consulting firm, and they are sort of fortune tellers, because every time they read reality, it happens. And they induce major corporations to follow the change, if you will. It might sound a bit strange, but when organizations like these, similarly to major training corps in the United States and in Europe, every time they have a vision, inevitably the economic system will align itself to that. So, and there is a quote by a colleague of mine from an important institute, so the best engineering school, Milan's Polytechnic. So, and also there is a quote made by this gentleman, who maybe he's not known abroad or known to the paper industry, but he's one of the main actors of industry change. His name is Luca Manuelli. He works in a completely different setting today, but just to set the scene, this gentleman, 20 years ago, when nobody was talking about it, he was working in a mid-sized business, manufacturing home appliances, Ariston, and he came up for the first time with the pay-per-use for laundry shops. So he's a major opinion leader, and he serves as a CEO of a leading company nowadays. Back then, he had to stop the project, and this is an anecdote that he shared with me, but I think it's very interesting, because the socket and the plug needed to connect the washing machine to the data transmission network was more expensive than the washing machine itself. So technology back then was a hurdle. Now, instead, technology comes cheap. So the cost of technology is no longer a hurdle, is no longer a barrier, and it nurtures new business models. Technology is cheap and within easy reach. So these people, these gentlemen, share my same opinion. So the 4.0 industrial model that leverages on 2 principles, that is to say, extreme connectivity, end-to-end connectivity from A to Z, from the first device to the end product, shall be seamlessly connected. So the entire supply chain, the entire industry shall get access to this piece of information from the beginning till the end. Why is that important? Why does that resonate with you? Well, because if we have a physical connection, and if I have IT logical connectivity, I know what happens to my product during it is manufactured and when it is used or consumed. Let me give you an example of this future revolution. Imagine a world where you no longer need market research. And I'm sorry for my marketing colleagues, but market research is based on the principle whereby I ask a consumer or a client why they purchased those cookies, whether the packaging solution was compelling enough, yada, yada, yada. But I'm asking him that after the purchase. So the time and space is different from the decision-making time and space. So, for example, imagine that you know already what will be the packaging the client will opt for when he is choosing it, and what's happening in his shopping cart. This could be very indicative, because this can contribute to an interconnected set of data that can help us understand the reason behind that choice. So imagine that this phenomenon gets pervasive. So Industry 4.0 tells us that, and if this happens, and it will happen, the more we improve the quality of our products, the more we can relay them to the client when the product is wanted and needed, rather than, for example, experiencing a delay in the decision-making process. And I'm going to come back to this point later on. So connectivity, connection is paramount. The second one is collaboration. If we want to be innovative, if we want to be reactive to these peaks, to these sort of roller coaster rides, and I might be questioned in the forthcoming future, because we will see peaks again coming up. So in order to react to these fluctuations, in order to react to these unexpected phenomena, which will happen, in the past we used a very stripped-down solution in our industry. That is to say, the stock management concept. So if you have stocks or spare supplies and there is a rise in demand, you're set. So that's the whole principle we've used in the past 20 years. However, our production system have been very linear, and stocks have disappeared. Besides, stock taking is expensive. The next scenario will be more precautionary, a bit more prudential, but we're not going to hoard products because the only way, from the economic and financial standpoint, will be to know what happens when it happens and reacting to that simultaneously in order to collaborate to tackling the reaction. A 4.0 system enables this set of skills. And let me give you a metaphor which I often use. It's as if you told me, look, imagine that you are at a crossroad and there is a traffic light, the typical Italian traffic light that has a shortfall because it is placed along the line where the first car would brake, would stop, and not that high position. So the first car will see green going red and vice versa. The other cars instead can only move if the first in the row will drive up. Otherwise they're going to be bumper to bumper. So the information gets to the tail when all the actors have interpreted the very first phenomenon, for example, the light going from red to green. So there is a delay, and the last actor experiences this delay. Just imagine that I'm going to put the traffic light at the center of the crossroad, very high up, so that even Mr. Brown, who sits at the very end of the tail, sees when the light goes from red to green, and all the cars decide to move together when the green light goes on. So everybody has information about the event, they all move in a synchronous fashion, and the line of cars crossing the crossroad, the number of cars is higher compared to the previous process. Industry 4.0 generates that, creates systems that can move in a synchronous and collaborative fashion, so they react together faced with a certain phenomenon.
So in a way, information is already in the hands of cars.
Precisely, and the cars will see the light going red to green as soon as that clicks. And just 1 second with that slide, because I want to keep it as a surprise. So a 4.0 system is a more resilient system in that it better resists to change in a more effective fashion. 2 years ago, I was asked by the sponsors to address the topic of Industry 4.0. And back then, a lot of businesses didn't get it. They didn't understand why they had to invest in this technology. Now, also thanks to the pandemic, they are clear-minded, and we know that a 4.0 system will enable and has enabled those who have already implemented it to manage these peaks and valleys, these fluctuations that inevitably will occur in the forthcoming future. And they will represent the hallmark of our society, because globalization is happening. We have to accept that.
So that the problem will not be widespread, right? Okay. We have to be mindful of the time, so let's move to the next slide.
So, in 2017, we started working on this project. We deployed it in 2018 and up to the mid of 2019. So I don't want to sound presumptuous, but in Italy, this is a very innovative project, and we ask the entire supply chain and the entire industry to subject itself to what we would call today a checkup. So a sort of a reality check through a very fully fledged questionnaire in order to see the extent to which these businesses were ready to deploy 4.0 solutions, also in terms of sets of skills. We mapped out two topics, the so-called capability, that is to say, the ability for a business to be a 4.0 business, and robustness of their processes. One of the most frequent mistakes made in the business world in using technology is thinking that technology solves system-wide problems. But as a matter of fact, if your process is not optimized, the technology cannot fix it. So we sort of imposed a deeper reflection on this industry, and I don't think that there is a similar kind of study in scientific literature, because the three associations represented within the Federation don't go above 1,000, but still we have a high percentage of respondents, 120 respondents, so a very high redemption rate, over 10%. So we sort of took very precise snapshots of how the industry was positioning itself. Next slide, please. We told them what could be done, and we gave them two examples of ideal checkup outputs. You know, you go to see your practitioner and you get a history and physical assessment. We mapped out a series of pathways here, but then the Federation decided to go the extra mile, as a matter of fact. This happened between 2019 and beginning of 2020, and hopefully we're going to go back to it because we came to a sort of a standstill. So they wanted to support the businesses in implementing this pathway. And in this example, you see that Company X shall go through a series of steps. As you know, Italian businesses aren't necessarily large-sized businesses, and so they need assistance. Assistance is expensive, so companies tend to say, especially in small and medium enterprises, oh, that's interesting, but thank you, but no thank you. So we deliver the guidelines. I'm going to skip this slide, if you don't mind, in the interest of time. And then we created this funnel-shaped pathway, and I'm not going to get into details. Just a couple of highlights. There is a guiding principle which was identified in 2018-2019, that is to say, training. These businesses needed to be trained, because I can talk about a 4.0 transformation, and you name it, but you have to have an educated knowledge, an educated audience on the other side. And so we started out with a series of training initiatives for companies that deliberately joined in, and we're thinking about shorter training sessions targeting decision makers, so those who are called upon to decide on 4.0 investments, so the leadership, basically. We mapped out a series of events, and this is one of them. My being here today is evidence of the fact that we we haven't forgotten about that very project over the last few months.
Insieme.
Yes, and many projects are coming the next weeks, right?
And the third step, so going from general training to hands-on training, is to identify on a voluntary basis those businesses who want to go deeper. In other words, we are thinking about going to these businesses physically in order to see the gap between the results of the checkup and today's reality, in order to fine-tune the pathway they will have to follow. And this is the ambition of the Federation, let me say. And they're very far-sighted because they are providing their associations with a toolbox somehow. They're proposing different sets of consultants, technological partners, schools of management, and so on and so forth, in order to address these topics and embark themselves on this evolutionary pathway. I have a dream. I'm going to disclose it.
Go ahead, please.
Well, my dream is that a lot of companies told us that they would like to expand on these checkups, and we wish to have at least 3 or 4 companies asking for that. A paper manufacturer, a printing or a printer manufacturer, or a packaging manufacturer, like 3 entities like these. I really wish that they would turn to us in order to identify the best suited pathway for Industry 4.0 in order to foster collaboration. Like next year, in an event like this with 1,100 attendees face-to-face, I would like to tell you about a collaborative Industry 4.0 project, the first one in the world. That would be the first example, because there is no entity nowadays that has done that, nor in Europe, neither in the United States or Germany, where they invented 4.0. That's a challenge.
So that's the challenge. That's very interesting. We really need to move forward with our program. Vincenzo, I guess we've covered it all. We've discussed progresses. We have also a vision and a dream for next year, a winning idea. So thank you to Vincenzo Baglieri, Professor of Practice at SDA Bocconi School of Management.